Greetings, I'm the Bulgarian Troglodyte. So today I'm gonna do a video on my top 5 favorite Italian directors, and I'm also gonna go through lots of honorable mentions. And this is of course in response to Solitary Rolling Films, who has a new video series that he calls, I think, Global Director Challenge, where he does top 10s for directors for different countries. But I decided to do a top 5 this time as well as I did last time, because when I was compiling the top 10, I got to like top 8, and then after 8 directors, there were plenty of directors that I had seen like 2 or 3 or 1 films from them, and I thought that that wasn't enough for me to include them on a list, so I decided that I'm gonna do a top 5 in the end. Yeah, I think I'm pretty ignorant on Italian cinema beyond some of these like really big canonical directors, so I need to do better and watch way more Italian directors. And when I get to the honorable mentions, I'll talk about some directors that I'm really excited to get into more in the future and hopefully in the near future and not in the distant future. Yeah. But anyway, I'll do this bit like Ronin, so I'll obviously talk a little bit about each director, but I'm not gonna go in depth with these directors. Yeah, I'll try to keep my thoughts fairly short. And as always, this is a stream of consciousness video, so I wouldn't even be able to have any like very long, interesting thoughts about these just off the top of my head. But anyway, let's get into the top 5 now. So my number 1 is a bit of an obvious choice. It's Federico Fellini. And I've been into Fellini's films for quite a long time because he was one of the first world cinema directors that I started getting into when I got more interested in cinema. And there was a time when I thought that I had completed his filmography, but then this has been added to Letterboxd, The Temptation of Dr. Antonio, like a few years ago when I almost completed Fellini's filmography. This didn't, or this wasn't in Letterboxd for some reason, but now it is. So I actually haven't completed Fellini's filmography, so I've been kind of, I guess, lying accidentally when I've said that because I haven't seen this film. And I don't know whether this is available anywhere. And then I haven't seen these TV advertisements, but I don't count them as films. But anyway, I have seen everything else here. And Fellini, to me, is a very consistent director. I've liked, I think, all of the films that I have seen from him, if I'm not mistaken. But of course, the quality differs a lot between different films and also between like different periods of his career because he, of course, did films. He made films for several decades, and the quality changes a little bit. Like I think the early stuff in the 50s, for example, lots of that is very good. Then the 60s stuff is very good, but then his last few films aren't as great as Eight and a Half, for example. But still, even his lesser films are ones that I like. And if I put it in a vulgar way, I would probably his worst films, I would still rate them like 7 out of 10 or something, and that's a positive rating. Yeah. But one of the things about Fellini that I like a lot is kind of his playfulness. Like there's this kind of sense of freedom in his films, and of course we often describe his films to have this kind of circus type of quality. It feels like his films are kind of dancing in terms of the aesthetic, and that can be quite over the top. And I think some people might find that playfulness a bit obnoxious, but I really enjoy it. And of course, I think it fits the kind of Italian character, that Italian personality, because of course, Italy is a fairly intense culture, especially from a Nordic point of view. Because here in Finland, we are very mellow and introverted and quiet, but in Italy, people are kind of very different compared to Finland, for example. But in Fellini's films, I really like that element, that playfulness. And I also like that he covered quite a lot of different subject matter in his films, but his style, I think, stayed fairly similar. Although, yeah, there is the Knights of Gabirias and La Stradas that have bit of that neorealist-esque style, but of course, neorealism period had uh, ended when he made those films, but it still kind of retains some of that neorealist style there, but then he adds that playfulness there as well. And the playfulness and the kind of dance, circus type of quality is very interesting in his films because sometimes it feels like some of his characters are very much trapped and they like have pretty sad destinies, but then the style of the film is still very playful and dance-like. So sometimes there's this kind of disconnect between the style and the and what happens to the characters and the places where the characters are at. But I think that disconnect works really well. Yeah. And I like both of his bit more kind of low-key films, but I also like the bit more bombastic and colorful films like Satyricon, for example. And Satyricon is actually, weirdly enough, my favorite Fellini film. And I know some people hate this film because, of course, it uh, isn't a very traditional film with a traditional structure or a traditional plot. But it's more of a mood and vibe, theme, aesthetic type of film. But I, again, love those films, but I know many people have this kind of rigid set of rules in their mind that, oh, art needs to always be like this. But I don't have those rules in my mind. I like when art becomes a bit more experimental and goes outside the box. Yeah. But yeah, Satyricon is my favorite. Then I'm of course a big fan of 8.5. I think La Dolce Vita is a masterpiece, even though on my first watch I actually disliked many elements of the film, mainly the kind of middle portion of the film, because on my first watch I really loved the maybe first 45 minutes or something, but then it got worse for me. But then on my second watch I kind of saw the film as a masterpiece. Then Amarcord I actually saw in the cinema, and it's such a funny film and excellent aesthetically. And then I think City of Women is an underrated one. That's all about the kind of relationship between and the dynamic between men and women, and it's quite hysterical in a good way. Yeah, so those are some of my favorites, but of course, Knights of Cabiria. That was the first one I watched. Love it. La Strada is great. I Vitelloni, which I also saw in the cinema, a wonderful movie. And like I said, I like lots of these other ones too. And I feel like Juliet of the Spirits might actually become one of my favorites after a rewatch because I liked it a lot. So yeah, I'm looking forward to watching this one again. But yeah, I need to watch many of these again. Yeah. But yeah, absolutely love Fellini. He's one of my favorite directors in general. I think I have him ranked in somewhere in my top 20. I don't remember exactly where I have him. Yeah. But then we have the other big director who worked around the same time as Fellini. So we have Michelangelo Antonioni, who is a director that I've always kind of struggled with explaining why I love his films, and I often tend to just say lots of the kind of same stuff as everybody else. So I love the architecture because I'm a architecture buff in real life. I one of my favorite things in life is to kind of walk in cities or maybe go to like take a taxi to somewhere and just look at the buildings. That's one of my favorite things in real life. So it's kind of natural why I would love a filmmaker who shoots architecture beautifully and who focuses on architecture. And of course, the architecture, it's not just the aesthetic of the architecture, the beauty, or sometimes the ugliness of the architecture, but the architecture says lots about the themes of his films, of the changing society, industrialization, uh, alienation, etc. Those types of things that he often covered in his films. So the architecture actually has more of a point there. It's not just that it looks great in the shot, but there is a point to it. But of course, Antonioni is very much of a kind of mood and theme type of director. His films often also has this kind of existentialist character to them, and the actual human characters there, they aren't like characters often in the kind of traditional sense, but I think they are more kind of a device on kind of exploring the society around these characters and what is going on in the society and how the society is changing and how a certain class or a certain type of person, like how are they dealing with those changing things in the society. So it's not about the characters themselves, but more about what the characters can say about the society and more about the kind of archetype of that character than rather than that actual individual. There, hopefully you get what I mean. Yeah. But I love again this aesthetic, vibe-driven cinema. I love that often more than the kind of traditional classical type of storytelling, which often to me is kind of boring. So I like these types of directors who try to experiment, who try to do something different, and who try to utilize the aesthetic of filmmaking, like the aesthetic side, because in the end, film is a visual art form. So I like when directors draw these kind of parallels to painting with this with their filmmaking, that they make their filmmaking more like painting rather than just storytelling or filmmaking. Yeah. But anyway, I'll talk about some of the, or mention some of the favorites of mine from his filmography. So, well, there's the Alienation trilogy, La Ventura, La Notte, L'Eclisse. Absolutely love all those three films. Then, in addition to those three films, Red Desert is another favorite of mine, and it obviously kind of works well with these three. Then Blow Up, I really need to rewatch, but I remember liking it quite a bit. The Passenger, I've seen a couple of times. On my first watch, I didn't really like it. It was the first Antonioni film I watched, and I kind of watched it for Jack Nicholson, and it was before I got more into art house films, so I very much struggled with that on my first watch, but then on the rewatch, I kind of got the film a bit better and started liking it, but it's still not one of my favorites. Then Il Credo is something that a kind of more of a normie type of film goer might like because it's a bit more traditional than the Alienation trilogy, for example. Then I've also seen some of these short films here, but not all of them. And then a couple of blind spots that I have are Identification of a Woman. Some people really love that movie, so I'm excited to watch that. And then Story of a Love Affair. Those two are the big ones that I haven't seen yet, but you can see there that I've seen 16 out of 37. Yeah. But anyway, an incredible director. Really love his style and connect. I also connect to the themes that he explores. Yeah. Then we have another really big, important Italian director. It's Roberto Rossellini, who has really kind of gone up in my estimation in the last couple of years. And of course, Rossellini is a fairly uh, like a varied filmmaker as well. That he has different periods and different styles. Like of course, there's the famous War trilogy, Rome, Open City, Paisan, and Germany Year Zero. All three of those are incredible films and very important kind of historical documents as well as they were just shot just straight after World War II. And then he, of course, did some films with his wife, Ingrid Bergman. And of course, they had a daughter who also got into film, Isabella Rossellini, Dorothy Valens from Blue Velvet. Yeah. But these films are very important. I think some of them were hated when they came out. Like I think Journey to Italy wasn't well received when it came out. But of course, these days it's a big kind of canonical classic that's often very highly ranked by critics. It's in the Sight and Sound top 100, for example. And then, of course, later on his career, he did these films about philosophers, like again this film on Socrates, then this film on René Descartes, and then this film about Pascal. And then there are quite a lots of films here that I still haven't seen, like this one, General del Rovere. And this one I'm very excited about, The Messiah. It's about Jesus, of course. Heard good things about that one. Then there's Fear, one of the Ingrid Bergman films. Then there's this film about India. I've heard is really good. This one I really want to see. And then, of course, there are these ones. I think probably these ones that are down here are probably quite hard to find. But yeah, hopefully they become more available in the future. Yeah. But my favorite film from him is actually Europa 51. This is a film that I absolutely love. I really connect to the moral questions that it asks. It talks about, I think, altruism, selfishness, for example. And he was kind of obsessed about, I think, ethics in general in some of his films because he was, of course, very interested in philosophy and Christianity and spirituality and things like that. And I think one interesting thing about him is that he didn't just focus on like a one type of class or one type of people, but some of his films are more about the working class, some of them are about the bourgeois, some of them are very much about the elite in the society. So we can see from that that he was interested in so many different types of people. And he was also, and I think, a very kind of, how do you say, that he was very interested in also like many types of philosophy, many types of questions about religion, many things about kind of human behavior as well, human psyche, and again, human ethics. Yeah. So I think there is something for everybody in his films. And his films can be very stripped down. Of course, the neorealist style is that it kind of focuses on the essential, and he kind of retained that a lot in his films about the philosophers. That those films can seem very dry because there's not kind of much conflict there. It's just about the philosophers and kind of their ideas and stuff. There are no like big plot twists or anything like that there, but I actually really love that style. And I really connect to that type of style and I could watch those types of films like very often. But I think many people would be turned away from those films due to the kind of stripped down style. But even though many of his films have that kind of very stripped down style, he often also managed to play with the narrative a lot, like I think in Journey to Italy, for example. So he wasn't just a one trick pony in terms of the style, but he did different things when it comes to like narrative structure and aesthetic as well. But yeah, I'm a big fan of his films and I very much looking forward to watching the ones that I haven't seen yet and also rewatching many of these films that I have already seen. Yeah, such a great director. And I definitely didn't do any justice to him as a filmmaker with my stupid stream of consciousness thoughts here. Then I don't have that much to say about these next two filmmakers, but I'll of course try to talk about them a bit. So first, at the number 4 place, we have Vittorio De Sica, again one of the famous neorealist filmmakers who made one of the big masterpieces of European cinema, Bicycle Thieves. But his filmography is also good. Beyond this one, I think Umberto D is pretty much as good as Bicycle Thieves, Miracle in Milan. I remember enjoying a lot. I think Two Women with Sophia Loren is an incredible movie that not that many people talk about, I feel like. Marriage Italian Style is, of course, a classic. But then I also have some blind spots here because I've only seen 7 films by him. So I haven't seen Shoeshine, for example, but I have this one ready to go. Very excited to watch it. Then this one is maybe the biggest blind spot: Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. So looking forward to getting into that as well. But what is there to say about him? Like, of course, some of these films have been talked to death, especially Bicycle Thieves. But his films can be very sad, especially again the neorealist stuff that he did. They connect with me very deeply emotionally. They are very devastating watches. But there is also lots of beauty in his films, even though they can be very devastating. And of course, after the neorealist period, like some of his films are also more comedic and different. So he wasn't just a one-trick pony who makes these sad and devastating films, but he had more to offer as well when he got older and when cinema developed out of the neo-realist movement. Yeah, but the director I like a lot, but again, don't have that much to say about his overall style, and I still need to explore his stuff more. But anyway, I'm a big fan of his films. And then last on the top five is Visconti. And there I had my favorite film by him, Lenotti Bianche, which is of course not many people's favorite, but it's my favorite one because it hits me so hard emotionally, and it's a kind of a devastating, sad love story, or it's about kind of one-sided love, and those types of stories are something that I really love. So it's no kind of wonder why I love this one the most. And the short story that it's based on, White Nights by Dostoevsky, is absolutely incredible as well. And the short story is maybe even more devastating than the film. But anyway, so of course, Visconti also started in the neo-realist period, and some of his early stuff is very much in the neo-realist vein, like La Terra Trema. And embarrassingly, I haven't seen Ossession, which is a very important film for the 40s Italian cinema. So I really need to get my act together and finally watch this one. And then I also have some other blind spots like The Damned, Ludwig, Bellissima, The Stranger, for example. Yeah. But I think uh, Visconti is maybe more versatile director than he gets credit for, because of course he made the neo-realist films, but then he did this kind of period dramas as well. Lots of literary adaptations like Death in Venice is of course a Thomas Mann work, which I haven't read, but I have seen the movie. And like I said, Lenotti Bianche is a Dostoevsky short story. Yeah. The latest film that I have watched from him was Conversation Piece, which is kind of an underrated one. I really enjoyed that one. But these types of period films are often something that I'm not that much into, but I think Visconti does them really well. And I think Ronin also discussed Visconti in his video where he talked about that. Yeah, his films can be beautiful, but there is also this darker and uglier side to his films that you can see, from example, in Rocco and his brothers, which kind of discusses masculinity, and it shows the darker side to masculinity, and that's a very dark and even brutal film. At points, it has some very shocking scenes in it. Yeah. But then something like Lenotti Bianche is very much just kind of an emotional melodrama that has this kind of an artificial aesthetic to it, but the aesthetic is very beautiful. And of course, there are lots of these films that explore the high society, but not all of them. There is also the working class element, of course, in the neo-realist films. But I don't know, I like him quite a lot. I don't necessarily consider him to be like an all-time favorite quite yet, like in terms of like all like world cinema, but he is quite close there, and I'm looking forward to watching more of his films. But yeah, I don't have that much to say about his films. But there is a long form chat about Lenotti Bianche on my channel, on my podcast. So there we went actually very in depth about the movie. And this is a movie that I have a lot to say about, but I feel like I don't have that much to say about Visconti in general. But yeah, anyway, a great, very important filmmaker. Then let's go through these honorable mentions quite quickly. So Pasolini would have been the number 6 on the list. I've seen quite a lot of his films. I've seen 10. The blind spots that I have for him are mainly the Canterbury Tales and Pigsty. Yeah. But I'm a pretty big fan of him. I mean, I haven't like truly absolutely loved that many of his films, but I always like his films a lot. And my favorite is actually the Decameron because I think it's just so funny. That's why I like it. And there's not much of a kind of intellectual reason why I love it. And Salo is, of course, a very misunderstood film, all about fascism. It's a critique of fascism, but then most people just say, oh, it's just shock value and stuff. Like, that annoys me so much when people misunderstood the film. I mean, of course, you don't have to think it's a masterpiece, but at least try to understand the point of the film. Yeah. And yeah, I like his aesthetic quite a lot, although I also have some kind of nitpicks about his aesthetic. Like he often has this kind of a bit of a flowing camera that the camera doesn't stay still, that it's always kind of moving a little bit. And sometimes I wish that he used a bit more just very steady still shots because that's kind of my preferred style. But overall, his aesthetic is very good. And he is, of course, a very transgressive artist. Even the films that might not seem as transgressive on the surface, they still tend to be quite transgressive. And yeah, what else would you expect from everybody's favorite gay Marxist? Yeah. But anyway, a great filmmaker. And then number seven would have been probably the kind of troglodyte of this list, Sergio Leone. And I have seen all of his films. Of course, he didn't make that many. Yeah. And I probably would have ranked him higher in the past, but currently I'm in a kind of a anti-Western headspace, anti-macho headspace, so I couldn't rank him higher, but he would have been again the number seven. But I really love the good, the bad, and the ugly, and Once Upon a Time in the West, and then the others. Well, Once Upon a Time in America is probably a near masterpiece. Then these two I like quite a lot, A Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More, and Dark Sucker I also liked. Colossus of Rhodes, it's not awful, but it's not good either. But it was watchable. Yeah. Then Argento, like even though I'm not that into Giallo or the Italian genre films in general, but I've seen a decent amount of Argento films. I have seen seven, and I really love Suspiria. Then I like many of these classics like Deep Red, Phenomena, Inferno. Well, Inferno was one I didn't like that much. Tenebrae I liked a lot. Four Flies on Grey Velvet was decent, and then Bird with the Crystal Plumage was decent. But I'm not obsessed about these films or anything, but I just enjoy watching them from time to time, not that often though. So yeah. Then we get into the directors that I need to explore more. So we have Ettore Scola. I absolutely love A Special Day, and we did a podcast on that film. It was a great chat. Then fairly recently I watched We All Loved Each Other So Much, which was another really good film. But then I haven't seen any of these other ones, and many of these actually sound really good. And I actually noticed that for some reason, a drama of jealousy is currently available in the Finnish Netflix, which is very surprising because Netflix usually doesn't have many interesting classic films or art house films. But for some reason, they have this one, so I think I'm gonna watch it soon. And then many of these other ones are highly rated here in Letterboxd as well, so I think that he has a good chance of becoming maybe one of my favorites once I do a deep dive to his filmography because again Special Day I think is a masterpiece and this one was really good too. So if these others are great as well, yeah, I think he could become a favorite. Yeah. Then we have Francesco Rosi, which I know Ronin is a big fan of. But I haven't really explored his films enough to know whether I'm gonna like him a lot or not because I've only seen the Matai affair, which I remember liking quite a bit. But I remember the copy that I watched, like the picture quality was a bit off, and I think the subtitles were a bit off as well. But if I remember correctly, but yeah, it was still a good watch. But I'm very much looking forward to watching his other films, like Salvatore Giuliano is of course a big classic. I have that one ready to go. Christ, Stop That Ebola. I know many people love this one, and it's absolutely embarrassing that I haven't seen these two films yet. What have I done with my life? Hands Over the City, The Moment of Truth. I've heard good things about these ones too, as well as Illustrious Corpses. And yeah, I'm looking forward to doing a deep dive into his filmography in the future. He sounds like a very interesting filmmaker, and I think he's one of the more political ones here. But I enjoy that stuff. So yeah. Then we have Bertolucci. I have seen The Conformist, but sadly and embarrassingly, it's the only Bertolucci film that I have seen. And here you can see how ignorant I'm about Italian cinema in the end. So yeah, of course I should have watched at least the ones here in the top row, like Last Tango in Paris, 1900, The Dreamers, The Last Emperor. Those are pretty famous and big films, so I definitely should have watched them already. But The Conformist is not one of my favorites, so it's kind of hard to say whether I'm gonna love his filmography or not. Then we have Elio Petri, and I've only seen Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, which I thought was a great film, but I've been meaning to get into many of these other ones, like The Working Class Goes to Heaven, The Tenth Victim, Property is No Longer a Theft. That title really intrigues me. Yeah, but another very political filmmaker, so yeah, I think it would probably make sense to maybe get into Francesco Rossi and Elio Petri like around the same time, as their films maybe tackle lots of similar types of themes. Yeah. Then we have Pietro Jeremy. I've seen Divorce Italian Style, which I remember liking a lot, but I haven't seen anything else by him. I think Seduced and Abandoned is a classic. I don't really know that much about these other films here. Yeah, so I don't know whether he has like a great filmography altogether, or maybe he only made a couple of great films. But yeah, looking forward to watching more from Jeremy. Then we have Mario Monicelli. I think I watched The Organizer last year, but I thought that this was a five-star masterpiece. So this made me very intrigued to watch some of his other films. And I know that Big Deal on Madonna Street is a big classic, for example. And I have seen this Boccaccio 70, but of course this wasn't just Monicelli, but there were other directors involved as well. But yeah, I don't know much about these films here or anything about these films, so I don't know how many of these films will be great and how many of them are available. But looking forward to watching at least some of his big films. Yeah. Then, uh, we have Lucio Fulci, and I've seen, I think, three films from him. I've seen The Beyond, The Zombie Flesh Eaters, and City of the Living Dead, and all of them were stupid fun. I enjoyed them, but again, I'm not that into this type of stuff. Like I like to watch maybe at best like a handful of films like this in a year. Like it's fun to like sometimes, oh yeah, I'm feeling like watching a Charlo film, but then I'm not gonna start binging them or anything like that. But I'm sure that I will watch some of these others in the future, like Don't Torture a Duckling, The House by the Cemetery, etc. But yeah, these were fun, especially Zombie Flesh Eaters, because it has that scene where there's the shark versus a zombie scene there in the water, so that was kind of fun. Yeah. But these aren't scary at all, but they are fun and kind of goofy. Then we have Franco Piavoli. I actually watched some of his short films in the past few days. But Nostos the Return I watched years ago, and it's such a beautiful film. Then I've seen this one, Voices Through Time. But these are the only feature-length ones that I have seen. Then I watched some of the short films, like I said. But Piavoli is a very interesting director. He's also all about the aesthetic and the vibes. There's barely any dialogue in his films. I mean, some of the films don't have dialogue, but they have music. And he likes to shoot nature, but in some of his films he also shoots people in a very beautiful way. So he's more of a painter type of filmmaker rather than a storytelling type of filmmaker. So again, he's gonna put off many people who have those rigid sets of rules in their minds, but Piavoli is someone who I'm looking forward to watching more of his stuff, and they tend to be in YouTube often. So yeah, but this one is the best one I have seen so far, so I would highly recommend this one. And I think I've heard from some viewer like years ago that in France there are lots of Piavoli films available on Blu-ray as well, but they don't have subtitles. But like I said, his films don't really have dialogue, so that doesn't really matter. Then we have Mario Bava. I think I've only seen Blood and Black Lace, which to me was fine, pretty good. But yeah, I need to watch some of these others here that people really love. But I'm not expecting to fall in love with his films or anything, but I think I will probably enjoy some of them. Yeah. But those were the honorable mentions. And again, I'll show my top five one more time. So here you have it. But again, sorry for my poor commentary. Yeah. And then I think Ronin mentioned that next is gonna be France, and that will definitely be a top 10 and not top 5 from me because French cinema is something that I've explored more in depth, and I already created my top 10. So yeah, that will be interesting. It will be very new wave heavy for me because that's the stuff that I love the most. But anyway, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think of any of these directors that I mentioned here, and definitely let me know any recommendations from these directors or any other Italian directors that you can think of. Yeah, but thanks for watching. Don't drink Coke at all. Sayonara and arigato gozaimashita.